Hey guys, so this is going to be a video about how to create tension within your body when you're doing strength training. So when you're doing strength training, it is a really important factor. The ability to be able to create tension is going to really impact your ability to be able to get stronger, impact your ability to be able to maintain good technique as you're lifting heavier weights, as the intensity is increasing. It's going to be a really important factor to prevent injury and to ultimately just optimize your performance in a gym environment, optimize the outcomes you get from working in a gym environment, doing different exercises. So think about it like, if you had a chain where all the links between the chain were welded together, but there was a couple of links that weren't welded together, the chain's not going to be a solid chain. It's going to have a few kinks that move a lot. And ultimately, the difference between not creating tension and creating tension is having a chain that's welded and is a really solid chain that's not going to move versus a kinky chain that's a bit all over the place. When we're in the gym, we want a chain that's welded the whole way and is really solid and isn't going to move. Ultimately, that's going to allow us to output more force and get stronger in the gym. Okay, so we're going to go through a few tips that are going to allow you to create more tension and ultimately create more stability within your body and create better outcomes with your training. So tip number one to getting more tension, more stability throughout your body is grip on really tight. So we have this saying, you want to grip on until your knuckles go white. So when you're holding onto a bar, when you're holding onto a cable, when you're holding onto a lat pull down, when you're holding onto a dumbbell, kettlebell, anything, grip onto it really tight. So when you grip on really tight, it has this irritation effect throughout your body. If you grip on a little bit, you'll notice your forearms start to tense. You grip on a bit tighter, your bicep and your tricep start to tense. You grip on even tighter again, your shoulder starts to tense. It's a bit hard if I was holding onto something. Grip on really, really tight, my shoulder, my pec, even my abdominals start to tense and brace. So it has this irritation effect throughout our body. And ultimately, gripping on really tight is going to create more shoulder stability, more lower back and core stability, simply just through gripping on really tight. So tip number one is grip on really tight. All the time when you're holding onto something, grip on as tight as you can. This one's just a little added bonus. It's called the drastic maneuver, I believe, which is ultimately where we bite our teeth. We go, and we just put a bit of downward tension. So we're gripping on really tight. We've got tension through our teeth. We're going to create a lot of tension throughout our upper body, and adding that bite down, that drastic maneuver, can help create that additional little bit of tension. So have a little bit of an experiment with that one. Okay, so tip number two is going to be bracing. So we want to be able to create a lot of tension through our core and our midsection. So just to give you a little bit about bracing is not going to be drawing our belly button in and sucking our stomach in and feeling like we're sucking our belly button into our spine. That is not bracing. That's abdominal hollowing. That's what they're going to teach you in Pilates, or a physio may teach you. And ultimately, that's activating our inner unit, so our deeper core muscles, our diaphragm, our multifidus up our back, our transverse abdominis. It's great to be able to do that, but if we want to create tension, that's not going to really create tension. We want to be engaged in our bigger muscles, our six-pack, rectus abdominis, internal, external obliques, our lumbar rectus, all these bigger muscles around the outside that are going to create a lot of tension and create a lot of stability. So drawing my belly button into my spine doesn't really create any stability. I can still bend sideways, I can bend forward and back, and it feels like there's something going on, but it's not creating much tension or stability. When I brace, it's like I'm getting fatter. Like when you brace properly, you'll start to talk differently. If you draw your belly button in, you don't really talk much differently. If you brace, yeah, okay, I can't talk properly now. And you'll notice if you want to breathe while you're bracing, so that's really solid now. Like it's harder for me to move sideways or even back and forward because I've got tension everywhere. The other thing with bracing is you're not going to be able to use your diaphragm to breathe. So it's not going to be deep belly breathing. It's going to be more chest breathing, like a little bit shallower breathing when you've got that brace. So have a bit of an experiment with that. Make sure you can brace. Make sure you can see the difference between hollowing and bracing and really feel the difference, like feel the different level of tension that you can create. When you brace, you should be able to poke your fingers into your side and you can feel hard muscle through here, like that's engaging. If you poke it in, And then your brace, you should feel tension being created there. Whereas if you're drawing your belly button into your spine, you're not going to feel any tension there. You're just going to still be able to poke in, draw my belly button in, then I brace. You see, it expands. All right, so that should give you enough about bracing, but we want to be able to brace through our core, and that's going to be a really, really great strategy. If we're now gripping on tight, we've got a little bit of tension through our teeth, and we're bracing, we're going to be starting to create a lot of tension. So that's tip number 2. All right, so tip number 3 is going to be about creating hip stability. This is going to be mainly with your lower body exercises such as lunges, squats, anything that's going to be lower body. Hip stability is going to be a little bit more important, but you will still use it with different upper body stuff as well. So if you're pressing overhead, you want glutes to be squeezed, quads to be squeezed, and have a lot of tension through all that area. You're pressing up and over your head like that. If you're doing a bench press, same thing. You want your glutes to be on while you're lying on the bench. So you've got really hard glutes driving your feet into the floor, and you've got tension through your lower body while you're doing a bench press if you're lying on your back. So hip stability, really, really important. Ultimately, the biggest thing, the biggest way we're going to create hip stability is by creating, having, I suppose, tension through our hips. And ultimately, like if we think about it, when hip stability and foot stability sort of work quite closely together. But ultimately, if we were doing a lunge, if we had no hip stability, it might look like this. We're wobbling all over the place, this sort of thing. That might be if we don't have a brace as well. So if we've got, gripping onto our hands are on our hips, we've got tension through our hands, we're bracing through our core, we're already going to start to have more stability here because we've got a stable top half. It's not like there's heaps of kinks in the chain. The only kinks might be just our hips. But when we're doing a lunge, we want to have that little bit of outward tension through our knee. So from our hip, we're pushing that knee slightly out. We're just keeping that outward tension through our hip. Ultimately, our hip's going to dictate where our knee goes. When we're doing a lunge, for example, we want to keep that little bit of outward tension through our hip so that our knee stays out wider than our toes. We don't want our knee coming in like this or knocking across our body. We want to keep a little bit of outward tension through that glute medius through here to really be able to do that. Also, same thing while we're squatting. So if we're doing a squat, we want our knees to go slightly wider than our feet, and we ultimately want to keep outward tension through the floor. So a great way to feel that is imagine you're standing on a piece of newspaper. You want to tear it in half. So your feet don't need to move, but you're putting outward tension through the floor. My glutes are on just through doing that, through squeezing them a little bit and then putting outward tension through the floor, pushing my feet outwards, keeping that up, down. So my knees aren't knocking in and doing this sort of thing. They're staying nice and wide. I'm keeping that outward tension through my hips, and that's what's feeling quite good. So tip number 2 is really create tension through your hips. A bit of outward tension is generally going to be how you'll do that, but yeah, get some tension through your hips. Great way to, learn to create a bit more tension through your hips can be to put a band around your knees and to keep it wide, to practice having that resistance inwards that helps us to create more tension outwards. So give that one a go as well. Okay, so our last one we're going to talk about is going to be foot stability. Foot stability is really key as well. So the keys with foot stability is if we're wearing shoes, to be honest, we don't want a narrow shoe that crunches our toes in together. We want to have a shoe that's a little bit wider that our toes can spread apart, or ideally we might even want to be barefoot. If you can't be barefoot, a flat-soled shoe like this with no cushioning is going to ultimately allow us to create more stability through our foot because it's a harder layer between our foot and the floor. A wider spread shoe that we can spread our toes out. Ultimately, we want to be able to spread our toes out as far as we can. And when we think about foot stability, we want to be ultimately creating a tripod between our big toe, our little toe, and our heel. So, for example, when we're doing, and a good way to practice this might just be standing on one foot and just actually spreading your big toe and your little toe as far apart as you can. So, I don't know if you can see my toes, but not like this, more like this. So, not like this, more spread out and really opening up, creating a tripod and just practicing standing on one foot. You can even, do different things to challenge your stability. Not a good dancer, but that can be a good way to challenge it. So in terms of foot stability, big toe, little toe, heel, really create a tripod. So when you were doing a lunge, for example, you'd step forward, really spreading your toes apart, down, obviously a bit of hip stability, keeping that knee out wide, and then back and through. Same with if you're doing a squat, you're gripping onto the floor, you're creating that stable tripod. When you're squatting and doing different things as well, you want to follow the center of your foot down. So, big part of foot stability is like, I suppose, having, being able to propriocept, be proprioceptive and really, feel where your body is in relation to your foot. So if you can feel the weight's in your toes, you're probably not centered. If it's in your heels, you're probably not centered. You want to be able to centrate your weight, your center of gravity over your center of balance or your, base of support, which is your foot. So big toe, little toe and heel, and really being able to maintain a central point in terms of where you can feel the weight is in your feet. Follow that central point down and back up, when you're doing different things. So ultimately with your feet, it's about creating that tripod and really, feeling that you're centered through your foot. Good way to practice. Do those single leg stances with, different movements there as well. So, cool. Okay, so that's our video done on creating stability. Tip number 1, grip on really tight, has a very positive effect throughout your body. Tip number 2, brace through your core. Don't hollow, actually brace. Feel the difference. Everything should expand when you truly brace, and you'll feel your lower back muscles engage. You'll feel everything engage. If you're just hollowing, nothing will expand through your side and you won't feel your lower back engage. Hollowing isn't going to do you much good. So make sure you're bracing. Tip number 3 is have hip stability as well. So mainly with hips, it's going to be keeping that outward tension and just having tension through your hips. So having control. You're not a floppy hips all over the place. You've got a little bit of outward tension through your legs. And you're keeping that feeling of tension in your hips while you're doing squats, lunges, different movements, any machine movements, leg press, etc. as well, creating that tension through your hips by having that slight outward pressure through your legs. And then tip number 4 is foot stability. So creating that tripod, big toe, little toe, heel, and really being able to feel and center yourself in your foot. So your center of balance or center of gravity is aligned with your center of balance or your base of support, and you can really, optimize that. An added tip is that drastic maneuver, where you can just put a little bit of tension through your bite, and that will add a little bit more tension as well. If you start doing a few of those different things, or all of those things within the different exercises that each is required, you'll start creating more tension within your exercises. You'll start progressing more, being able to lift heavier, being able to hold better technique as your intensity increases, and your results from the gym will keep getting better and better. So get tight, learn to get tight and create tension in exercises and enjoy the rewards.